Welcome to the Pakistan Electricity Review 2025. As some of you may recall, our first iteration of this review, which launched last year, it was the first of its kind, data-driven, and widely appreciated effort that captured the attention of stakeholders, not just in Pakistan, but also globally. The inaugural report covered not just one fiscal year, but also 2 decades of Pakistan's energy data, where our data team at Renewables First collected and analyzed data for the past 20 years of Pakistan. And we build on that momentum this year, and you are here today to witness that. In this year, we will be focusing on the fiscal year 2024. And why does this matter? Because our sector is in flux. The last year alone has seen over 16 gigawatt of solar panel imports, rooftop solar installations, and signs of structural shifts in generation, distribution, and transmission. These shifts are layered with systemic challenges, rising capacity payments, deepening circular debt, and underutilized assets. Today's launch offers an insight into these challenges as well as the opportunities that are coming forward. What you'll gain is a clearer picture, whether you're a policymaker, a decision maker, a research analyst, or a civil society member, or somebody from academia. So what we look forward to are the choices that we can face given the data that we have. Let me run you through the program. Today, we will be expecting a session that lasts around 50 minutes. We'll begin with a 20-minute presentation with the key findings on Pakistan Electricity Review. Then we'll move shortly to a timed panel discussion on the implications of the solar PV adoption in developing countries and the opportunities and challenges that come with it. And we have 2 esteemed panelists with us, Dr. Dinita Satyavati from Ember, who's a senior energy analyst, and Ernst Kuhnman from Agora Energiewende. Thank you all for being with us today. And finally, we'll open the floor to questions towards the end of that panel discussion. So I'll start us off. I'm pleased to introduce Rabia Babar, the data manager from Renewables First. She leads the Energy and Climate Renewable Data Center at Renewables First, and she led this review alongside Huma Naveed, and both of them have played a key role in gathering and analyzing the fiscal year 2024 data. With support from the broader research team at RF and in collaboration with Herald Analytics, this report is truly the result of this collective effort. Rabia, over to you now.
Okay, thank you, Abiha. Just confirm if I'm audible to everybody. So welcome everyone to the second Pakistan Electricity Review by Renewables First. I'm Rabia, and I'm pleased to share with you that Pakistan Electricity Review 2025. So this covers the data for fiscal year 2024. So this is it's a big echo over here. So this covers the data for fiscal year 2024. So for the international audience, I would like to mention that it covers the reporting period of July 2023 to June 2024. So with this review, we try to bring clarity to the complex and fragmented Pakistan's power sector data. By consolidating data from multiple official sources, we have tried to offer data-backed insights and analysis, not just for the policymakers, but also for the local and international stakeholders who are interested in Pakistan's electricity market. But most importantly, this is for the end electricity users in the country, so that they can understand what does this data mean, not just what's happening, but why it's happening, how different trends are shaping up, and most importantly, from this point onwards, to which direction the Pakistan electricity market is heading towards. So also recognizing the challenges associated with the scattered and inconsistent reporting in this power sector while we are working over here. We realize this, and we are working to integrate these different data sets into a unified platform that is Renewables First dashboard, PACI, that is, we call it PACI over here, Pakistan Energy and Climate Insights dashboard. So in coming days, all the updated data sets will also be available on our Renewables First Energy Dashboard. So with this dashboard, we want to support the energy market analysts and researchers working out there to have a better analysis, and most importantly, we want to contribute to promote an evidence-based dialogue in the sector. So let's start with the key highlights that developed in the fiscal year 2024. Let me share my screen. So I hope my screen is visible to everybody. So let's start with let's start off with the country's generation capacity. As we can see from this slide that in fiscal year 24, there was a slight increase in the country's generation capacity from 45.9 gigawatt in the previous fiscal year, that was FY23, and now we are standing at 46.2 gigawatt. So basically this addition, this minor addition was due to the addition of 3 new utility scale plants that you can see over here. The names are written over here. So if we look at this visualization, we can see that the Pakistan's generation fleet is primarily dominated by the thermal energy sources that makes up around 62% of the country's total installed capacity. And this is followed by the hydel generation that contributes around 23%, followed by the nuclear. Now, talking about the renewables share in the Pakistan's utility scale level. So we can see that there's a slight nudge from 6 to 7% from FY23 to FY24. Primarily, this is driven by the addition of 350 three cumulative capacity of 150 megawatt solar plants in the generation fleet. So overall, if we can see this heavy reliance on the fossil fuels in the Pakistan's generation capacity, and majorly these are the imported fossil fuels. So these have significant implication in terms of affordability, emissions, and the energy security. So talking about the fiscal year 24, the key challenge that remain and that is now still on position in the country is that the underutilization of the country's installed capacity. So talking about the fiscal year 24, if we talk about the numbers, despite having a sizable capacity, the average annual utilization was around 34%. And so what does it mean for the end consumer? This means that 66% of the capacity remains unutilized, yet customers still have to pay for that extra cost through capacity payments. So all this contributed to higher per electricity generation cost, declining affordability from the grid electricity, and a growing shift by consumer towards more competitive energy sources. So let's see how our electricity generation evolved over the years in Pakistan. So let's now look at how between the fiscal year 22, let me share. Is there a point over here? So between the fiscal year FY22 and FY23, over here, you can see the electricity generation has seen a significant decline of around 10.4%, and it was the highest over the 2 decades that the country has seen. And the fiscal year 24 follows the same pattern, although the growth was modestly declined by 2%. But we have to be mindful that the total projected generation for the fiscal year 25 was 7%. So this reveals the underscore a broader trend of declining electricity demand from the national grid. Another important factor to ponder upon over here is that in FY22, you can see, in FY 2017, you can see, mind all the background noise there. So there's some kind of announcement going on. Talking about the coal in the Pakistan's generation mix, we can see the coal was gradually added from the fiscal year 2017 in the country's generation mix. And around FY 2022, it kind of peaked over here. And after the fiscal year 2022, the coal generation is on a decline. So again, in FY24, we can see there was a 4% decline in generation from the coal. Another important thing to look over here is that about the share of natural gas in the country's the generation mix. So with the natural gas reserves depleting from the reserves, so reliance, most of the gas-fired plants are now shifting to the RLNG-based transition. So that's why also with the addition of new RLNG-based plants starting from 2017, you can see the share of RLNG is also increasing in the country. So just quickly, let's see exactly what the generation mix in FY24 remained in the country. Hydel led the share, followed by RLNG. If we talk about energy source wise, Hydel led the share, followed by RLNG. So the share of RLNG is now, as I speak earlier, is increasing in the country's generation mix. So as I talked about in the last slide, the share of RLNG, here we can see that due to higher RLNG prices, the share of the, you can see here, let me again share the pointer with you. So this is basically the electricity generated, and the gray lighter bars present the projected share from these energy sources for the reporting period. So if we look at the fiscal year 24, the share of RLNG has increased 4 times against its projection numbers. So it was initially projected that we'll have 6 terawatt of electricity generated from these resources, but we ended up having 24 terawatt hours from this energy source. So due to the high RLNG prices, dispatch from RLNG fired plant typically ranks lower in the economic order. However, in fiscal year 24, major challenges was the frequent violation of these merit audits, primarily driven by the gas pipeline constraints and long-term RLNG supply agreements. So all these factors, along with the transmission constraints in the system, also led to more reliance on the generation from RLNG-based plants. So for our international audience, I would like to highlight over here that the key issue was power evacuation challenges that led to this increased reliance on RLNG, especially transferring electricity from the south of the country to the north of the country. So Pakistan's most cost-efficient power plants are located in the south of the country, and our load center or demand centers are towards the north of the country. So we have to evacuate power from south towards north of the country. But the system constraints, transmission system constraints, restrict this evacuation of power. So ultimately, the reliance on the RLNG plants also increased. And if we talk about the energy purchase price, so it was obvious if the share of the RLNG is increasing, then definitely its cost is increasing over here as well. So here the same pattern is followed. The generation increased 4 times, and the electricity cost, energy purchase price from RLNG also increased. So alone, RLNG is the highest contributor to the energy purchase price, having a share of about 51%. That is 568 billion against the total actual EBP of almost 1.1 trillion PKR. So it held almost 51% share in that energy bill. So next we'll discuss about how the electricity sales trend from the national grid remain in the past few years. Electricity sales, as I mentioned earlier, it struggled its position over here. We can see a 3% drop in FY24 over here. So here we can see from FY22 there is a decline in the electricity sales. So this year it's 3%, marking it a second consecutive year of decline in electricity sales. Although there was a modest improvement in the country's GDP, which stood at 2.4% in FY24, still it failed to stimulate the electricity sales growth in the country. Another important thing here to notice is that in FY24, the number of electricity consumers in the country increased to almost 40 million with the addition of 2 million new users. However, despite this significant growth in the number of consumer, electricity sales from the national grid still declined for the second consecutive year. So if we zoom into the electricity sales by consumer categories for the fiscal year 24, we can see that the highest drop is reported in the industrial consumers of around 11%, and that is followed by the agriculture consumer who also saw an 11% decline in year-on-year sales. So at the face of it, this decline in electricity sales appears to be driven by rising electricity tariffs in the country in fiscal year 24 and the exponential growth of solar PV adoption around the country that we all know we are talking about everywhere over here. But however, I think a comprehensive analysis is needed to identify the exact reasons behind this electricity decline. So we can identify exactly which consumer groups or tariff slabs are seeing the decline in electricity sales. So if this comprehensive data and analysis is available, then this could help in designing targeted electricity packages and aiming at encouraging the incremental sales in those segments over here. So again, the second year of decline in electricity sales from the national grid was reported. So as I talk about the uptake of solar PV in the country. So throughout the last year, Pakistan remained in the highlights for record solar imports from China. By the end of December 2024, cumulative solar imports from China in the country were around 37 gigawatts. So to put that in perspective, Pakistan's total installed capacity is around 46.2 gigawatt and having solar panels imported of around 37 gigawatts. So this volume is highly significant and is nearly comparable to the country's installed capacity. These imported solar panels are now being installed across the country, either in form of on-grid systems or off-grid systems. So if we talk about the on-grid system, these solar installation either came through net meter connections or behind the meter connections. So again, for the international audience, I would like to highlight that by the net metering connections, we mean those consumers that can sell back the excess electricity to the grid, while behind the meter consumers are those consumers that have the solar panel installed on their rooftop. They use it for self consumption and they cannot sell back to the system. So the trend, it's obvious, if the solar imports are coming in and they are increasing, the trend in the net metering installation is particularly striking. We are seeing almost over here, if you can see, the trend is almost it's increasing 2 times every year starting from FY22. It was 0.7 gigawatts installed net metering connections in the country, that doubled to 1.3 and then to 2.5. And if we talk about the comparison between fiscal year 24 and the first 9 months of fiscal year 25, so almost if there's 1 quarter left for this fiscal year to end, and we have almost achieved the double number of that. So by the end, when this last quarter is complete, we are expecting that it will go beyond 2 times for the fiscal year 25. Again, we have to be mindful of the fact these are only the net metering capacity that we are talking about. There's a large number of non-net metered or behind the meter connections. Their numbers are not accounted for anywhere. They are not reported. So we don't know exactly how much capacity is installed in the country in form of these rooftop solar installations. Next, quickly, I would like to share the disco-wise or the utility-wise net metering installations that are shaping up. So LESCO over here is leading the race with almost 1.3 gigawatt of net metered connections installed by the first 9 months of FY25, or we say quarter 3 of FY25. So the majority of these net metering connection installations are concentrated in the load centers that are This is obvious from this graph also, reflecting that high electricity demand and rooftop potential in the urban areas. So another important fact over here is that around 95% of these connections are all those connections that fall under the category below 25 kilowatt. So typically these are the residential and small commercial users. The remaining 5% are above the 25 kilowatt capacity, and usually these are those consumers that are high commercial building or the industrial users. There has been a record growth we can see in the rooftop solar, particularly in the load centers, including that indicates a sustained momentum in solar adoption around the country. However, an important fact to note over here is that despite this boom in net metering connections, the export of excess units back to the grid, they are very less as compared to the CPP-HE units procured by the discos. So the ratio is 99 to 99% versus 1%. So only 1% excess units from the net metering users are bought back by the utilities, while 99% of the energy procured is from the grid. So additionally, the solar PV imports from China between January and March 25, they also showed an increased number, signaling towards a strong and continuing growth in this momentum. So as these installations are coming online, so we can see a shift in countries' peak demand patterns. And over here, we can see that usually in Pakistan, the the peak demand used to happen in the months of summer. That is usually the June month over here. So we can see usually this peak demand light over here. But just for quick reference, FY24 is highlighted with the yellow color. Over here, we can see our peak demands are now shifting in the month of July, August. So if we can relate to our solar installations, so we can say that usually July, August, September are monsoon months in the country, and the solar generation from these panels are reduced. Plus, the cooling requirement is increased on the grid. So peak demand is now shifting in these months. On the other hand, if we see towards the month of April, the lowest peak demand in comparison of these 4 years is observed in the month of April. So this is a very interesting point over here, because in April, the cooling and heating requirements in the country are low, and the solar generation is also on a rise because of good sun cover available. So here we can see the variation between the fiscal year 23 and 24 is huge. So we believe that because of this solar uptake, along with the change in the weather patterns, are changing the peak demands in the country. Again, this is a representation of a month-on-month comparison between the fiscal year 23 and 24. Here, we can see the generation profiles on hourly basis, starting from midnight to 2300 hours. And here, the generation profile in gigawatt hours is mentioned over here. Again, like I mentioned in the previous slide, between the month of July, August, September, when there is particularly monsoon season in place, the variation is less as compared to those months, particularly in March. We can see a huge variation between the fiscal year 23 and the fiscal year 24. So with the uptake of this solar, we can see this variation happening very fast. Now coming on the financial end, in FY23, with the addition of 3 new coal and RLNG plants, capacity payments in FY24 saw an increase of 46% year on year. These projects usually require high periods during their debt repayment period, putting pressure on the financial sustainability of the power sector. When such plants are underutilized, the unused capacity still adds on to the cost, leading to the higher electricity tariffs in the country. So to address this idle capacity, the government is renegotiating the contracts with IPPs, focusing on plants with high capacity payments and low utilization factor, also to shift from take or pay to take or pay contracts to take and pay to save the cost on that end. Additionally, the majority of savings from government's power sector reforms will only be realized with the debt reprofiling of coal IPPs under the CPEC project, along with successful renegotiation of the contracts for the government-owned power plants. So this takes me to the last slide for today, and here we'll quickly talk about the circular debt that rose from 3.6% on year basis. So as of June 24, Pakistan's power circular debt is now around 2.31 trillion in FY23 to 2.39 trillion in FY24. So the payable amount to generation companies Okay. The payable amount to the generation company surged to 12% year-on-year basis, reaching PKR 1.6 trillion, and now comprising 67% of the total debt. You can see the breakdown over here in the second area chart over here. And the PHPL debt alone continued around 20% of the government of Pakistan's guarantee stock. So Pakistan power sector also incurred losses of PKR 276 billion in FY24 due to transmission and distribution inefficiencies, the highest in the past 5 years. So these losses primarily stem from the outdated distribution lines and the overloaded transformers directly contributing PKR 276 billion to the circular debt. So without urgent reforms, these losses will keep on straining the economy and the energy sector. So this was a quick overview, just the highlights from our Pakistan Legacy Review for the year 2025. So our complete Legacy Review report is now available on Renewables First website, and its link will also be shared by our team in the chat. So before wrapping up the session, I would like to emphasize that these are just a few challenges that I have talked about, and there are multiple segments in the power sector entangled with different challenges ranging from generation, transmission to distribution. The main priority at this stage is to explore various ways to increase the electricity sales in the country from the national grid. So increased sales are essential for ensuring the financial sustainability of the sector, while other reforms follow on the secondary level. Also, I would like to highlight the fact that this was not just another year for the Pakistan's power sector, it was a transformative year, because as the consumers are uptaking solar PV transition on a very fast pace, so consumers are telling us something loud and clear that the system is not working for them, so they want to take things in their hand, or they want to build their own systems. So with this growing uptake of solar PV in the country, grid enhancement must be prioritized to enable the smooth integration of these distributed energy resources coming online. Also, overall grid infrastructure also need improvement and should be prioritized to reduce the curtailment of power generation from the south of the country to the north of the country. And lastly, the last thing that I would like to highlight about is the utilities. The discourse that we call over here, utilities should now gradually transition towards the digital systems, not only to improve their own operational performance, but this is the key towards the smarter grids, and that is the need of the day and should be, and it should remain the area of focus in the coming years. So thank you everyone for your time. Over to you, Abiha.
Thank you, Rabia, for that rich presentation. I understand there are questions that people have. We would love to take the questions in the Q&A session right after the panel that we're just about to start. So please keep your questions ready and we'll take them after that. And you can use the chat box for your questions. Now, let's move on to the panel discussion. And let me introduce our panelists. First is Dr. Dinita Satyavati, who's a senior energy analyst at Ember, where she focuses on electricity policy and clean energy transitions across Southeast Asia. And she has a strong emphasis on energy justice and sustainable development. And second, we have Ernst Kuhnmann, who is a project manager for power system integration at Agora and Energiewende, working on market reform and renewable integration in Southeast Asia with experience across Europe's leading energy institutions. And thirdly, we have Babar again joining us for this panel discussion. So we'll start with Rabia first. Rabia, you've been closely tracking solar PV panel import numbers and the growth of net metering installations in our country. How do you assess the current momentum? Do you see it stabilizing? Do you see it increasing? Or do you see it slowing down? And another part of the question is, seeing from a global perspective, how do the international developments, such as changes in global supply chains or pricing trends or politics or policy shifts, influence this growth long term?
Okay, Abhiya, thank you. So I'll take your second part on the priority first. So talking about the international or the global perspective, so international developments do impact the landscape at our national level. So just talking about the US-China tariff war, how it's impacting Pakistan, and also the US pivoting back to the fossil fuels exploration. On the other end, China is scaling up not only its own renewable energy portfolio, but its renewable energy manufacturing units and the EV manufacturing. And China is leading the race in that domain. So Pakistan's sharing border with China heavily impact these developments on our country. So just talking about the recent numbers from January 25 to March 25, a huge quantum of 7.5 gigawatt of solar panels is imported just in these 3 months. So this also reflect that these tariff wars going on, the solar panel prices going down internationally are impacting the local consumers over here in Pakistan as well. Secondly, talking about these numbers that we are at Renewables First following very closely from the Q2 of last year. So yes, these solar imports are increasing and the momentum is there. Solar imports are increasing quarter by quarter, as we also shared in our Pakistan Electricity Review, a chart about that as well. And also, as I mentioned in my slide as well, the net metering installations are also increasing. So the government and the policymakers have to align themselves with what's happening on the ground. So I believe that the country should reap the benefits of these solar imports and should collectively work towards the grid enhancement and other infrastructure development to gain the benefits from all these solar imports and installations that are coming online. Yes, Satya.
Nice. Thank you, Rabia. And connecting the same question, I would say, ask Dr. Denita, do you have any comparable examples to the solar rush in Pakistan and how that rush is like maintained in other countries?
Yes, so actually, because I'm covering Southeast Asia, I just want to say that a quick review of the electricity demand and renewables build up in Asia in the past few years shows some progress and a pivot away from coal. But to be honest, there hasn't been any like solar revolutions like what's happening in Pakistan. Like we see some growth in Vietnam solar. I think the solar capacity surged from 11 gigawatt in 2019 to 26 gigawatt in 2023 in the whole region, largely due to Vietnam's feed-in tariff introduction. And Peninsular Malaysia has also made some strides with its solar net metering scheme and consistently meeting its quotas. And there's also the push to deploy more solar rooftop, for example, from Thailand, the Philippines. But I think the solar growth in Pakistan is incomparable with Southeast Asian countries.
And a follow-up on that, you mentioned that there's no comparison, but at the same time, for global South countries, what are some of the opportunities, maybe job production or clean energy goals, like broader goals of those, or energy security? What sort of opportunities does this solar PV revolution unlock or could possibly unlock in developing countries?
Yes, so I think it's also important to note that it is crucial for the countries, especially developing countries, to develop the local solar PV market. And of course, solar has also been proven to solve energy security issues in areas, remote areas where it's disconnected from the grid. Like people can just have like a community solar system, and while at the same time, solar could also generate jobs. And in one of our reports from Indonesia, we calculated how much jobs that can be generated from the diesel switch to solar. But of course, with the right upskilling, and then local communities can also participate in this whole supply chains of solar and the solar farms in their areas.
I think there's a lot of opportunities there. And now moving to some of the challenges, Ernst, I had a question for you. From a utility planning perspective, how should countries prioritize investment in grid modernization to accommodate this solar?
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, congratulations on your new report. I think it's extremely insightful, and it seems to come at a very timely, critical moment in Pakistan's power sector transition. So congratulations on that. I think your question is critical. We're seeing across many countries, not just emerging economies, kind of the infrastructure challenges that come with rapid renewables deployment. So what we know is that much of it actually does come down to an infrastructure challenge, which is ensuring that grid capacity, but particularly distribution grid capacity, keeps up with the generation and network requirements from renewables. And perhaps it's good to point out, many of you are probably familiar with this, but distribution grids were traditionally sized based on peak demand. As more and more DERs come into the grid, different metrics start to determine how you size your distribution grid. Things like reverse power flow, the need for voltage management, ramping needs, these aspects all become more important besides just peak load in order to determine how much you have to invest in the grid and when you invest in your grid. So what we're seeing in some cases is that DERs are deployed in a highly concentrated fashion, perhaps in some areas of the grid that are not particularly strong. And what could happen in some cases is that DER capacity overtakes grid capacity, which then results in reverse power flows, in overvoltage, in kind of leading to a situation, leading the grid to grapple with challenges that it wasn't designed for. But that's not the only part of the story. DERs can actually also help defer costly grid investments. So what we're also seeing is that if DERs are deployed in a coordinated fashion, for instance, targeting areas that are already congested, but where the grid capacity is capable, but just a little bit overloaded, DERs can actually reduce peak demand and can take some of that congestion out of the grid. So what this tells us is that it's very important for DERs to be co-optimized with grid planning, and utilities have a big role to play here. Essentially, what will be important for many countries is to come up with new mechanisms to integrate resource planning, to integrate generation procurement in sort of the wholesale level, DER deployment at the distribution level, and grid investment by the utilities themselves. There are multiple ways of doing this, but one potential mechanism that's increasingly explored by countries is to look more at the locational value of DERs and embed this within the support policies that are being proposed, that are being introduced. Now, net metering has been extremely successful in many countries in deploying DERs, also in Pakistan, as we have seen. So what could be a potential way forward is to say, okay, or for utilities to identify local areas in the grid where DERs could reduce peak demand and thereby defer costly grid investments, and target or prioritize those areas with net metering or net billing schemes. What the potential of taking such an approach is that it actually buys utilities time to postpone grid investments in some areas allowing them to reprioritize grid investments in other areas. And when that has happened, the net metering scheme could be expanded, ensuring that more and more citizens have access to these support instruments, allowing them to secure affordable and clean energy on site. And of course, there are many ways to tweak your design. You could think of capacity caps to make sure that local deployment doesn't overtake grid capacity. You could think of locational pricing mechanisms. There are many ways of going about this, but this locational aspect in support policies may become increasingly important for utilities to actually also yield cost savings and benefit from the deployment of these technologies.
Thanks. Thank you, Ernst. So there are multiple opportunities there as well as to challenges that you've mentioned. I would be mindful of the time and ask Dinita another question. Dinita, do you have any focus areas that the government should be considerate about while modernizing or enhancing their grids to accommodate this solar PV uptake in these countries?
Yes, I think, we are going to release a report focusing on the ASEAN grid, and we identify 6 broad categories or pillars that the government should take into account. They are mainly consist of smart grid modernization, so upgrading existing grid infrastructure with digital tools and smart technologies, strategic grid expansions, which is strengthening the physical grid to connect generation from VRE energy resources and reach growing demand, system flexibility and resilience, and in the ASEAN case is the regional integration and interconnections. So building regional power systems that share resources and improve efficiency through trade. There's also market and regulatory reforms, so creating open, transparent, and competitive power markets at the regional level. And then lastly would be sustainable finance and investment mobilization. So ensuring long-term financing for grid upgrades, new infrastructure, and innovation. And I fully agree with Ernst's comments before, saying that we have to defer the infrastructure development from like costly grid development to DRs to better efficiency, to better maximize their renewable energy potentials.
Thank you. I have one more question for you, Ernst. Can these rooftop solar installations be used as virtual power plants? And if so, what infrastructure requirements are needed for that?
Short answer, yes, very much possible. And a lot of potential for it as well, is essentially what VPPs or virtual power plants do is to integrate renewables through aggregation. So instead of having small plants distributed across the grid, you essentially get an aggregated plant that can act as a single unit. On the technology side, VPPs generally work better if they're complemented with battery storage. This really makes them dispatchable. It's also important to have to make sure that VPPs can sell their services to the grid. They can actually deliver crucial grid services, frequency response, ramping needs. But it's important that these services, these flexibility services, are properly remunerated. So this can be done through market routes by having short-term markets, ancillary service markets. It can also be done where markets are not present through a utility program that specifically procures and remunerates such service. It does come with a couple of other requirements. It's generally important to have smart inverters so that the aggregator has remote control over assets. It's important also for utilities to have real-time data at the distribution level.
Right, thank you. We are very close to our mark, and I'll be asking you questions because we're opening the Q&A round. So people in the audience, please feel free to ask questions and leave your questions in the chat box, and we will refer them to the panelists. And for the panelists, please feel free to answer them in the chat as well while I ask you these questions. Okay, so are the projected numbers based on annual projections submitted by the CPPA to NEPRA for average annual tariffs? I believe this is for Rabia.
Yes. So yeah, those numbers are from the University of Industry report. And while you go through our Pakistan Lecture Review 25, all the data sources are mentioned in the footnote of that report. So you can kindly refer to those.
Okay, I have another question on why in the fiscal year 2024, Pakistan has imported less coal but resorted to imported LNG for power generation. Is it because coal plants were already running at high utilization?
So I'll take this one. Also, as I earlier mentioned in my slide where I was showing the electricity generation trends in the country. So electricity generation from the coal is on the decline, and specifically if we talk about the generation from the imported coal is on a decline. And during the fiscal year FY24, the imported coal plants were very much underutilized. And in few months, I think it was in December 23, the utilization was around just 3%. So the main reason is that although if we talk about the economic merit order, so in the economic merit order, first comes the gas plants, then the local coal, imported coal, and then the RLNG plants. So just because of the RLNG contracts in place, we have to procure those LNG cargoes and have to be utilized accordingly. So, in violation of the economic merit orders, generation was increased from the RLNG plant. So that's why the generation from coal-based plants, specifically the imported coal plants, remained low, underutilized during the year.
Thank you. Next up, we have a bit of a long question, but I'll read it out loud. Rooftop solar adoption is accelerating rapidly, yet this raises a critical concern. Can we scale distributed solar without compromising grid reliability and the long-term stability of the power sector? In your view, what strategic interventions are needed to enable the grid and rooftop solar to coexist and complement each other effectively? I believe any of you can take it, so please feel free to answer.
Maybe Ernest, you can take this one.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Did you say Dinita or Ernst?
I said, Ernest, you can take this one.
Yeah, sure. Would you mind repeating the question?
Yes. So rooftop solar adoption is accelerating rapidly, yet this raises a critical concern. Can we scale distributed solar without compromising grid reliability and long-term stability of power sector?
Yeah, in short, I think we can. It's just very important to ensure that that we adapt the system according to the DRs that are coming in. When it comes to grid upgrades, I think the point we discussed before is quite relevant. Focus on the critical areas where grids need upgrading to integrate DERs. At the same time, focus on areas where DERs can help alleviate congestion and defer grid investment. So this is about investment efficiency in the end. At the same time, it would be important to adjust the procurement strategy. What we're seeing in many countries is an over-reliance on baseload power, which brings some rigidity and inflexibility into the system, particularly when it's coupled with inflexible contracts, minimum take obligations, take or pay clauses, etc., which either bring dispatch inflexibility or system costs. So it's important for countries to move away from that procurement paradigm, if you will, and focus increasingly on network investment, flexible capacity to complement the variable nature of renewables, as well as battery energy storage, which is becoming increasingly competitive and highly deployable on a larger scale.
Nice, thank you. We have another question for you, Ernst. How could batteries play a bigger role to facilitate DERs?
Battery energy storage has a crucial role to play for solar PV. Thanks to technology cost declines, solar PV plus BESS can often compete with conventional power. And in fact, it makes the solar PV nearly dispatchable. So it's crucial. It can also be very important in ensuring grids aren't overloaded. And here again, the location is a very important consideration.
Thank you. I'm going to, I think, refer this question to Danita. Why does Ember's website in Pakistan show percentage share from solar and wind at 13%, where it appears it is much lower than that?
Well, that I will need to check with the data team and then get back to you on this. But normally we use GEM data, Global Energy Monitor data, and ARENA data for capacity. So that's probably why the discrepancy. We also have like some discrepancy for Indonesia data as well.
There are multiple questions. So a lot of congratulations are in order. I will be mindful of our time and give a little bit of a wrap-up time to Rabia so that she can wrap up the discussion. Thank you to all of our panelists for the thought-provoking discussion. We now invite more of your questions and we'll be answering them in the chat. Please stay engaged. And Rabia, over to you now.
So thank you, Abiha, and thank you, Tanita and Ernest, for a very insightful discussion that we have today. And it's a very timely conversation in Pakistan, as the numbers speaks for themselves. The solar imports increasing as well as the installations are increasing around the country. So talking about Pakistan electricity review. So again, I'll emphasizing the fact that this is a very transformative year for the sector in terms of the solar PV uptake in the country, and to rather embrace it. And we should look for the ways, like just Ernest and Dr. Danita mentioned about how those could be, the grid enhancements could be made, how these could contribute towards reducing the cost of infrastructure development in those areas where the grid is not available. They can rely on these, and the utilities can defer those plans as per their assessments on the regional level. So yeah, we look forward to a year of progress.
Okay, so I think.
So I believe there was some kind of disruption in the connection. Yeah. So just to wrap up, as we are almost running on the time. So looking ahead, the focus should now be shifting from adding the generation capacity to the existing fleet, because we are already underutilizing the country's installed capacity that is there. So focus should be on increasing the electricity sales from the national grid. That would ultimately help ensuring the financial sustainability of the sector. And secondly, our priority should be towards the grid enhancement to accommodate these upcoming SDRs to the system.
Thank you, Rabia. Moving to the last sessions, I think this report would not have been possible without your hard work at Renewables First, Homa Naveed, and your team. The broader RF research unit as well. We're also grateful to Herald Analytics and our panelists, Danita and Ernst. Thank you for joining us. As we've seen today, that Pakistan is at an inflection point, and while these challenges persist, we must continue in our efforts for a renewables acceleration. We hope this conversation sparked interest and it can lead to more dialogue and learning and collaboration. With the Pakistan Electricity Review 2025 is now live on our website at Renewables First. We invite you to explore it and engage with it. Please engage with our social media, ask questions, and thank you again for joining us. And until next time, please take care and stay engaged. Thank you.